Hi, welcome to the Soulful Leader podcast. This is Stephanie. I'm here with Maren, and we have a very special guest, Jeff Sanchez. And I, I was really so impressed with this man. Really, in a world where we're so focused on the outer, on whether we're good enough, whether we belong, um, whether we're achieving or moving forward in our life, we're so looking at it's like we're solar powered, right? Like it's we get all our energy from the outer results. And Jeff has a wonderful organization called Bodoc that he has taken that and flipped it, saying, that that's really a side effect. Let's work with the underpinnings of all of that so that you become really extraordinary citizens in this world. So, from his own personal story of growing up, feeling the pressure of trying to excel and exceed and yet not feeling that unity, that connectedness with others, and yet so longing. I think we can hear in his longing how he has began an organization that is the remedy and is the solution for his own interconnectedness and how he wants to give and share it to the world. And when I asked him about what does Bodoc, his company, mean, he said originally, he's like, it was just one of those things that, hey, I kind of, it was available, so I got it, and I fixed bows, and it was kind of nonchalant. It's such a metaphor of where he was tuning the bow and the bow and arrow to be able to really stay focused on our reason for being and what it really does matter, what matters in our life, what gives us fun and fulfillment. And that's actually what he's doing. He's tuning those he coaches to be able to really receive the guidance from the future that wants to happen, and to really work with that internal dialogue, and so that we're not so reactive in our life, but we're more responsive and good people, good human beings.
He's a very powerful leader, and I'm really glad we got a chance to interview him. He also happens to be my husband, so I am biased in some ways. In others, I think oftentimes we take for granted the people around us, and we don't always recognize the great things that they do. And when I see both the youth and adults that he coaches as an archery coach, and all the people that he's impacted, one of the things that I think most about him is that he's a people first person. And that comes through in everything that he does. And you'll hear it in his leadership style and the things that he says at the end. It made me want to well up with tears. So I hope you enjoyed our podcast interview today as much as we did. And remember that you can always find out more and see other people that we've interviewed who have different leadership styles on our website, thesoulfulleaderpodcast.com. Enjoy the interview.
In a world where we have everything and it's still not enough, we're often left wondering, is this really it?
Deep inside, you know there's more to life. You're ready to leave behind the old push your way through and claim the deeper, more meaningful life that's calling you.
That's what we invite you to explore with us.
We're your hosts,
Stephanie Allen
and Maren Oslak. And this is the Soulful Leader Podcast.
Yay! Jeff, it is so great to have you here with us today. I'm super excited to hear about your evolution and why you do what you do, and even how you do what you do, because I know you do things a little differently. So let's begin, because I know you work. Actually, I want to start with a question, because I know you work with younger people, and what I'm finding a lot is there seems to be a lot of, like, at least with the people that I'm working, the young people that I work with, there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of like, where do I fit in this world? How do I belong? I don't know what my gifts and strengths are. I don't know where I'm going or what I'm doing. What is my value? What is my worth? And I know that's not just with young people. I know that that's kind of pervasive throughout many of us, but in particular, I know that you work with young people. And if you could tell us a little bit about who you work with and why you work with and how you got into it.
Okay. Yeah, sure. I do work with a lot of kids and adults, but our kids program is much bigger than the adult program. And it's pretty amazing the diversity in the kids that we do get because we will have some kids that come to us that are involved in all sorts of other activities. They excel at all sorts of different things. But we also get a lot of kids that have never really found a home, have never really found that activity or that group of people where they really get that sense of belonging.
Mm.
Some of those kids tend to be very shy, or um, their social skills may not have been as developed yet because of that shyness or because of the lack of community that they've been missing in their life. Um, so it's pretty amazing when we do run into kids that can thrive within our community. And that's one of my favorite aspects is building that community where all sorts of different types of people can thrive together.
Mm.
And so those kids that come in that may be struggling a bit with some of the social aspects or the self-confidence, or they've been through uh, some traumatic experiences in their life where they are very reserved. They don't want to open up. They have that wall up, um, because it is very hard to um, build that trust. For them to open up to trust someone, to allow someone in to get to know them better.
Yeah.
So to me, that's one of my favorite aspects of our programs is when we can kind of tear down those walls and get the kids to open up, get them to have a voice, be heard, be seen, and really step outside, or push their comfort zone a little bit further out, little by little, so that they gain a little bit more self confidence.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, pushing outside of your comfort zone takes a lot of trust because you're
Yeah,
stepping out into the unknown. And if you already aren't feeling self-confident or you don't feel like you belong, there's no friggin' way you're gonna step outside of your comfort zone. So, as a leader, what do you do to cultivate trust? Like, are there certain things that you create or set up in an environment, and maybe there's even, standards, boundaries, and things that you put in place that help really create a safe container.
yeah. Well, one of the things, I've been very fortunate to have a pretty diverse background of activities and different things that I've been involved in throughout my life. Both good and bad. I've had the opportunity, from my hockey playing and traveling all through North America playing hockey at the highest levels, having, gain experience doing that, but also, being in situations where my self confidence was really hurt a lot from playing up in age groups. I always played with older kids growing up, so that's kind of tough when there's an age difference and you're viewed as like the little kid, and so really like you don't get that bond with the teammates like you would hope to get.
Right.
Um, the same thing through high school. You know, quite honestly, high school was probably the worst 4 years of my life. Um, just because I went through a lot of bullying in school, I went through a lot of issues, and really every day I kind of dreaded even going. So there was a lot of experiences throughout those years, um, that have helped me to understand what kids that are having those type of issues, what they will feel, what they're really going through. The fact that most kids, even in today's world where there's a whole lot more offerings as far as programs and counseling and people to go to, it's still very difficult for kids to open up about issues that they're going through.
Hmm.
And back in the 80s, the mentality was more like, suck it up and just deal with it. um, there wasn't a lot. We didn't really have anyone to turn to.
Mhm.
Um, so as far as building trust with the kids, the good thing with all the experiences I've had is that I can open up to them and discuss some of the stuff I've gone through that helps them realize that I actually have an understanding of what it actually feels like. Not just telling them like, "Oh, here's a solution that you should try," but without having actually been through some of those experiences.
So you
So
relate to them. You find that
yeah,
connection and
so
connect
that
them and say, "Yeah, I've been there too." The empathy.
yeah, so that's one of the biggest things with connecting with the kids is being able to show them, first of all, I hear what they're saying,
Mm.
and that some of the solutions or some of the processes that we will work on are from real life experience and not just like theoretical. Um, so it is interesting because with archery being the main sport that I'm coaching, it's a very mental sport, just like any individual type sport. A lot of the team sports have more reactionary processes that get incorporated. Um, there's tremendous amount of mental uh, processes also in all the sports, but the individual sports where it's just golf or tennis or archery, those type of sports, um, it can be extremely mentally challenging, and there's certain mental blocks that kids and adults can hit within their sport, and it has to deal with self-confidence, it has to deal with anxiety, it has to deal with just the mental pressures of the sport, and you basically hit these mental blocks that prevent you from being able to perform at a level in which you are trying to perform at. And there's some really, really skilled athletes out there, but when it comes time to actually perform when it counts, they can't. Just like a performer having stage fright,
Yeah, they
right? They
fall
might be,
apart.
yeah, they might be a great singer or musician or dancer, but if they have a bad case of stage fright, when they get out there, they're not going to perform at the level that they can. So we run into a lot of the same things, and I've run into several people that have hit those walls. Um, and that's a big challenge then to work on that mental side, work on gaining their trust so that they open up about it and don't just try to bury it.
Yeah, because that's a real key thing. And when I kind of come back with that is like the burying of the what you're feeling and the fear, the all that different thing, and be able to create a space where you can really talk about it and transform it to change
Yeah.
it. Because
Yeah.
not only are you doing this in the way of a sport, I think there's also an element that you are making the parallel to one's life too. So it's
Hmm.
like you're coaching archery, but it's more than just archery. Is that right?
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
it so that they
Absolutely.
have transferable skills to, you know, to be able to take out into the world and feel confident and belonging and
Yeah.
also create trust and relationship in the outer world as well.
Right. So any of my programs, um, they are all built around social development, building self confidence, respect, um, and finding happiness in what you're doing. So even when I talk to parents of kids that want to join my program, I always explain exactly, my philosophies, what they can expect, what's expected of the people in my program. But I also do explain to them that archery, even though like I'm one of the top coaches and I produced a lot of very successful archers on the national and world level, that archery is secondary to what I want them to get out of my programs. So I basically say that like archery is kind of like the happy consequence. Becoming a great archer is more of a happy consequence of going through my program.
It's a
But
side
building,
effect.
yeah, it's a happy side effect.
Yeah.
And building the person, building their self confidence, building their ability to be happy and to um, have the ability to use their voice, converse better, whatever it is that they're trying to do, whether it be something at work or school or other activities or other sports. Building up the person is first and foremost, and becoming a great
Mm.
archer is the benefit you get also, but it's not
I
the
So
top priority.
I
I
love
love,
that.
yeah. I was just thinking, we just did a podcast. It was either last week or the week before, and we were talking about a people first philosophy in business, right? And it's it's very rare. Usually we hire somebody for the role rather than for the person. And that's what the same thing that I'm hearing you say of like most coaches coach their sport. They're
Mhm.
not thinking of coaching their people. And even when they are thinking about coaching their people, it's still that kind of pushing to become the best rather than let's bring the best out of you. And if you become a great archer in the process, good for you. And if you don't, you still become a great person. I love
Right.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even when we're setting our goals, whether it be goals just for a tournament that's coming up or goals for the indoor or outdoor season as a whole, there's kind of like a top level outcome goal. And we always talk about how you really don't have control over that, because it may be that I want to make the podium at a tournament or something, but other people are involved. So you do the best you can, and then you just see kind of where the chips fell and see if you happen to get an outcome goal. And then the other goals being the performance and process goals, that's really where we're living. We are living at the performance level, trying to become better or healthier or stronger. And then the process is basically what's my to-do list to work on those things. So in the same sense that we were talking about, where becoming a great archer is kind of like a benefit of the programs. Obviously we're working very hard and very structured to become good archers, but it's wrapped around the development of the person first and foremost. And
Yeah.
so when someone happens to get a podium spot or win a tournament or set a national or world record, um, it's absolutely something to celebrate. Um, but to me, I always tell them that that's the bonus. The learning process, the going to a tournament, understanding yourself better, because we learn a lot. If we go compete, we will learn a lot about ourselves and the process of competing and how we react to certain situations and how we handle certain things. We will learn a lot about ourselves, both physically and mentally, in those situations. And if we happen to actually hit an outcome goal and make a podium or do something like that, that's kind of like a bonus then. So
It's
first
so
and foremost,
key.
we want to learn
Yeah.
at each event.
It's so key because you're making a shift in the way that most people, myself included, I can relate to myself. It's like we make the measurements of whether or not we are exceeding, like, excelling along in our life by what's going on outwardly, instead of what you're saying is like, yeah, let's work with those process goals. Let's work with the internal aspect of like, hey, how did you react or respond to that? And how do I have to say, like, how do people respond to that? Because it's a different way of thinking and being. Because they're like, well, what do you mean, Jeff? Aren't you going to get me to the podium and I want to be a better? And aren't you going to help me with my skills and my acuity and all these different things? And you're like, yeah, that's the byproduct. Let's go deeper.
Yeah,
How do they
well,
respond to things like that?
because none of my programs, at least the ones that I coach personally, are open enrollment. Um, you have to be invited into those programs, and over the years we put more and more structure into how someone gets into my programs. And so we have taken what I've done and started to put it into the other levels of training, so that as they're working their way up, they are already being put into a very similar environment right from the get-go. The parents understand what that process of learning is, what's focused on, what's talked about. The parents are sitting right there. I,
Right.
I actually like when the parents can hear kind of the deep thought conversations we're having, um, because that's I want them to understand my program as well as possible. So by the time they get to me, at least now in its present day form, um, they already understand what's expected of them, how my programs work, the fact that it is wrapped more around the development of the person, all that kind of stuff. So I don't really have issues with people like being surprised that the program is run how it is. But the other, I guess, good thing we have is a very long track record of producing national and world level competitors that are very successful. So they can look at what our archers have done in the past and see like how successful our program has been for many years. Um, but then also once they get into any of our programs as they're working their way up towards my programs, they get a glimpse as to the type of training they're getting, and especially the parents. They're most of the parents are basically like, that is the type of training I want my kid in.
Mm.
They can become a good archer, but boy, are they going to become a much better person
Mm.
going through this program. So I tend to have very little um, turnover as far as people leaving the program. And I'm not saying it never happens, but it's very little. Um, Most of my turnover would be like from kids getting old enough to go off to college or something.
Mhm.
Um, Same thing with my adult programs. The adults that have been with me a long time, a lot of them. And then we get new adult students and kid students that come in each quarter, um, but they tend to stick around quite a while, like years. So I've had some kids that have been in my program since like literally they were like 8 years old or something, and now
Wow.
they're working at the shop. They're like some of the best shooters in the country. They're amazing young adults, and it's just amazing to have been with them through that whole growth process. And to me, it's just like amazing to see that.
Well, it's like you've cultivated an environment, like you
Yeah.
said, your intention to grow, and that's
Yeah,
what they're doing, and it's creating that safety and security and that trust that it's like, okay, this is a safe place, and it's
yeah.
not about the outer, they're actually evolving inwardly.
So right from the get go, one of the biggest goals of the was to really build a community, not just archers, not just like teach people how to shoot and be great. You can shoot a bow now. It was the entire goal right from the get go was to build a community of people so that everyone can have basically a huge support structure around them.
Mm.
Um, I understood like that I would be a big part of that as I was growing it, but I'm just one person. They need more than just me to have a support structure. Um, so the fact that we have built a community of people that individually they thrive pretty well and do really well, but together, even doing it together with each other is even more amazing to see how they interact. All these people that never even knew that each other,
Mm.
and the how amazing, how close they are, how much they rely on each other, how much they turn to each other. It's to me is just amazing to sit back and watch. So
I love that.
From the outside, I'm kind of in it and I'm kind of outside of it, right? So I observe it because I'm not a regular coach. And one of the things that I see is the development of both the kids in the program and their parents. And the, like he said, the community that has been created is one of the most amazing communities I've ever been a part of, where everybody does support each other and they take responsibility. It's so beautiful to watch a 15-year-old young man take responsibility not only for himself, but for like,
Mm.
because Jeff has, what do you call the team leaders?
Just the captains.
The captains. He has captains for each of the teams, and it's somebody, it's a youth and or an adult in the adult class. So when you see somebody who's 12 or 15 who's taking a leadership role and doing a beautiful job of it, and then when they're not, when they feel stuck, they don't do what most of us as leaders do, which is, oh, I should already know that. No, they turn around and they ask a question, and
Mhm.
they're learning that from that young age. And that's one of the things that I love is watching these young adults just come to life, where before they were in the program, they would completely like withdraw into themselves or into their shell, and they're starting to come out. And he has them once a year. He does a thing where they perform and they bring their other skills and they all sing to it. Like, it's crazy the amount of things that they do together. It's just, and because they're choosing to outside of the program, they actually choose to hang out with each other.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, it's a chosen family where you feel safe, and it's not a dysfunctional family.
Yeah.
It's one that allows you to grow and learn and evolve and celebrate each other's success. It's like I hear like the competition, like it transcends the scarcity mentality around you and me, or that separation. And like you said, you want to make that collaborative. It's like it's a new way of turning that competition inwardly, of saying, okay, what's changed in me and what do I need to move within myself, or where do I need to ask help? Because if I don't, I'm going to be the same or worse next year. Like it's like internally. So
Mhm.
it's flipping competition to an inward place rather than an outer, and then it's like, hey, look at that. I did pretty good in the outer world too. How about that? But that's the
Yeah.
secondary. I like that. It's the secondary because our world is so created, isn't it? Like to value who you are by what you do and the awards that you've made, and the outer representation rather than who you are as a being. And I think that's what I hear you trying to shift, is that change that outer paradigm, that outer narrative, to
Mhm.
upgrading the internal narrative.
Yeah. Like once in a while, we will. I have a couple of big whiteboards, up in class, and we'll put a bunch of words on the board to describe why we work so hard on things. And we'll get a bunch of words up there like for consistency, for stability, for accuracy, for repeatability, all the different things we work on with form and structure with our shooting and everything like that. And, one of the things I'll normally leave a blank space in the middle of all these words, and put at the end, like if no one has said it, and put the word fun in there because we do work really hard, on our shooting, and it tends to show at the tournaments and what people are able to do. Um, but we actually have a lot of fun doing it because we incorporate many different aspects of training. We do a lot of different activities that have nothing to do with archery. We do homeworks that have nothing to do with archery. We do community service events. We'll have
Mm.
outings like the captain. I leave it up to the captains to schedule outings, and we all might go roller skating or we all might go, wherever, go to a karaoke place and whatever it is. And, you know, it gets back to building the community up. And so when the people come in, and I know it's that way for me, like Mondays and Tuesdays are kind of my main days for my programs. And like, I really, really look forward to those days, which I'm very fortunate because a lot of people, that have other types of jobs or something, sometimes they don't quite have something to look forward to necessarily. So I really, really look forward to those groups. And so when I see that they are interacting outside of archery,
Mm.
or I see them applying some of the life skills more than just archery skills to other aspects of other teams they're on or other activities or at home or whatever. Or I see that their ability to open up and converse and be heard and seen is increasing.
Hmm.
All those things just really validate what we're doing. Um, so it's to me like when I can just kind of step back and watch the groups, they're big enough. I mean, there's a lot of people. But even when we're at the tournament and we have, 30 or 40 people at a tournament and stuff, it is so nice just to kind of be in the background and seeing them interact, seeing how they're interacting with each other, the other competitors, the adults and the kids, how they're supporting each other, seeking each other out to go cheer them on, all these different things. And it's not me having to
Mm.
tell them, go do this, go do this, go do this. Um, it's just
Yeah.
part of their community now, just to do it. So that to me, that's just an amazing aspect of it.
So, one of the things that I know about you is that you're very structure based. For those of you who have kind of followed us along for a while, you know that we do something called wealth dynamics. And in the wealth dynamics profiling, Jeff is what's called a lord. And lords are systems people. So as I am hearing you talking, it sounds like, oh, it just happened. All these people came together, and isn't it lovely? And we've created this beautiful community.
Yeah.
And what I know is there was a lot of process and systems and a lot of thought that went into designing it intentionally to be what it is today.
Yeah.
Is there anything from that analytical side of you that you wanted to say about kind of like what went into kind of the thought process of building what it's now become?
Yeah. I was actually giving that some thought of like if I was going to try to explain uh, where some of those Lord aspects come into play. Part of what I was thinking about is basically, it is, well, even just go beyond just the basic like planning and trying to figure out what I want to build and how I'm going to build it and stuff. Part of what has helped me from my Lord profile is really being able to see in people, in processes and situations or whatever, the what can be
Hmm.
instead of just the what is.
Mm.
I love that.
So that I was trying to think of like if there was an underlying theme to a lot of the processes or the community or the things that I've built and the things that I have in my head to plan out. Um, that what can be is a really big aspect of it. And then kind of if you go back to what we mentioned a little bit earlier about the goals, if what can be is a performance goal of what am I trying to build, accomplish, do, all these type of things. Um, but then really where the processes come in from the Lord perspective and the planning and gathering data nuggets and puzzle pieces and just keeping them up in my head or in notes or whatever, so that at some point they're very useful for what I want to do. Um, but that's basically the Lord processes will create then the to-do list, and what actually has to happen when it has to happen. So you may be gathering all sorts of data, all sorts of information, um, little pieces of what you want to do that may not be necessary, at least in the present, but you're always building those pieces up. So by the time they're needed, you already have made so much progress on those aspects, that you're not being as reactionary. And that's, I guess, one of the things I guess a Lord profile, what helps me with is to not be too reactionary, because we're always trying to see what's down the road, what's coming up, how we are trying to create certain things, and all those pieces of the puzzle are falling into place in the background that no one sees anyway.
That's what I
Un-
was just gonna say. It sounds like you're tracking those pieces of the puzzle and
Oh yeah,
researching them and
yeah,
gathering them, and until you have enough of those pieces, and then you
yeah,
start to see the patterns, then you know what to do from there. Instead
yeah,
of reacting on, yeah, let's do this. It's well thought out.
yeah, and like even getting my program started, um, it was back in 2013. I had a pretty severe heart attack, and it was obviously life changing to me. Um, in many ways. But one of the biggest ways it was actually life changing was to decide that I'm not going to do anything that I don't enjoy doing anymore. Um, and at the time, I was doing coaching and dancing and teaching and doing all sorts of stuff. Um, but from the archery perspective, because I was splitting time on many different things, it wasn't like I can totally focus on my long-term plan yet, even though certain pieces were falling into place. So that kind of was the catalyst back then to say, okay, you have the time now because you are limited in being able to do these other things. So focus on building that community up. And what it was is basically like a plan. It was a several year plan, 3 or 4 year plan to say, okay, here's where I want to be in 3 or 4 years with making progress towards this. Because a lot of people knew me locally. Um, I did a lot of work on people's bows, coaching locally, different things. But the plan to build this community out was never limited in my head to just a local community. Just the people that knew me kind of thing. So, it was a long plan of especially because I couldn't shoot anymore at that point either. So I did certain things to keep myself involved, to build up the coaching side of things, to build up networking throughout the archery community across the country, to help build my program up, even though I couldn't shoot anymore, at least at that time. Um, but I wanted to build up the coaching and community side of things. So it went from basically that 3 year plan worked out really well. And it went basically from starting from zero to having a national presence and, a lot of people around the country, coaching a lot of people around the country, and building up a very nice community here. Um, by the end of 3 years, it got to basically where I needed it to be to really have the foundation in place to really now start making it grow bigger and
Yeah.
bigger. So, but it was a lot of background planning, a lot of doing things that didn't look like it was necessarily related to the end
Yeah.
result.
Yeah, that's a key. Because sometimes
Right.
you think,
But
how this isn't even related. How is this even helping?
yeah, so it was a lot of stuff that did not directly look like building an archery community. But when it was time to utilize those pieces of the puzzle, they were huge in creating this community. So
Cool.
it was a very interesting process.
I see that as one of the reasons to know your profile. And it's not that knowing your profile, you didn't suddenly start doing these things because you knew your profile. And it gave you more insight into, oh, that's how my brain works, and almost a permission to, like, oh, I can, oh, that's cool. Yeah, I know how my brain works now. And I'm going to almost exploit that, right? I'm going to dive into it fully.
Mhm.
And, you and I have talked about the fact that my brain does not work like that. So my profile is a star profile, and we think very differently. And that's also been helpful to know that, oh, that's how Jeff thinks and this is how I think. And so even in conversations that we have, it's it helps me to understand that's just a language that he speaks because that's how he thinks. And it's not the language that I speak because it's not how my brain thinks,
Mhm.
you know? So
Yeah.
the whole communication piece, that's one of the reasons I wanted to bring up the profile, is because it does, in what I've seen in our life, is it's really made a difference for us individually and understanding how we think ourselves. It also has made a difference in us as a partnership and how we communicate with each other.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, it is kind of interesting because both of us will kind of chuckle or laugh at each other a little bit sometimes when we know that it's, that's just the way the brain, like her brain thinks or my brain thinks, and we understand the differences much better since understanding our profile. It's been many years, but nonetheless, um, sometimes I think we just laugh at each other a little bit because we understand that that's that thinking process, that's unique to us, coming out. Um, but it has absolutely helped to understand what our profiles are and understand, and like Maren said, to be able to exploit the benefits of being that profile. There's definitely limitations, like, because when you have a certain profile, that means you're not good at certain things, but you might be good at other things, right? So, it's a benefit, and sometimes it could be a detriment when you have to deal with stuff that's outside of your
Mm.
main profile. But it really helps to have that understanding as to why you might be struggling in an area or exceeding, or being successful in an area.
Yeah, it's good to go deeper inside to find out that, not try to figure it out, but just understand. Because when there's more understanding, there's more space, isn't there?
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the things, if we look at like the building of this community, the building of the archery teams, and whatever, um, it definitely didn't start just with the archery stuff. I mean, this goes back years and years, when I was working downtown and stuff, and running different IT teams in the trading industry and mentoring people and having teams to run and stuff. But that profile definitely came into play back then, also to help the people that worked for me to put processes and plans and together to basically make them happy, to get them into roles where they can really thrive. Understanding, even though I wasn't testing everyone, but kind of getting an understanding of what their profile is so that I can now, as a Lord, start putting the pieces in place to help them move into areas of the company or into certain types of projects where they're going to be much happier. They can really thrive. They can lead projects and not be stuck in roles that are opposite of their profile that would just frustrate them. So using the Lord profile, um, to my advantage has been very, very useful, um, throughout all the different career stuff I've been doing, whether it be on the IT side in the trading industry or with all the community and building up the archery community and stuff like that. So it's been very, very beneficial to, to really understand that profile. So,
So I have, I guess, maybe a final question for you is, if you were to give leaders out there some sort of advice or something that you do that you find, you know what, I've found this really useful for myself. Is there something, either one of those directions, that advice that you would give to someone who's coming up as a leader or wants to improve themselves as a leader?
um, yeah, I guess it would go back to a couple of things. The one thing that I would really draw on is, the advice basically that your dad gave me, Maren's dad. Um, And that is basically surround yourself with great people. And especially, if you think of people, if they work for you, or, or they're, part of a
Mhm.
team, and, you're trying to get the most out of them, um, get great people. But as the leader, your job is then to do whatever you can to make them successful. And, your dad was a amazing example to me, and very inspirational to me to take that on, especially when I was in the IT world and taking on bigger and bigger roles across the country and across the world running teams. Um, and the other example I had of that was the boss I had for many years in the trading industry. He basically ran the teams that way. He uh, he put together some amazing teams of people, and we all absolutely love working for him. And we're very loyal to him, would work our butts off to make him successful because he did everything in his power to enable us to be successful.
Mm.
And in the trading world, there's a lot of chaos, there's a lot of craziness to deal with. And he was amazing at shielding us from a lot of that.
Mm.
So as I grew in the trading world and had my own teams to run across the world, and I would just look at his example that he set for me for many years as I worked for him to apply that to my team. So I had two amazing uh, inspirations to draw from, you know. And then the last inspiration, and this gets back to the trust thing that you were mentioning, Stephanie. Even my dad, growing up, he coached all our baseball teams, and he had such an amazing ability to take any kid that all the other coaches didn't want or had issues with, or the kids had issues, whether it be social issues or getting in trouble at school or on the streets or whatever. He had an amazing ability to take these kids and start relating to them and to get their trust and to then put responsibility on these kids. And they responded like it was amazing how these kids responded to my dad, and how he got them to perform at
Mm.
levels that they probably never even knew was possible. But one of the things with building that trust, getting back to that, I mean, trust really has to run through all this
Mhm.
stuff. Um, is he would actually talk to these kids like they were worth something,
Mm.
you know. And I actually get a little choked up thinking about, um, but it's
Mm.
probably the way he would relate and talk to these kids is probably something they've never had before. So when I look at those examples, of Maren's dad, Mike, who I used to work with or work for many years, and my dad, like everything I'm trying to do is, you know, do what they would have done,
Yeah.
because they were so amazing at it. So yeah, but it's that trust factor that really has to run across everything.
Mm. That was so beautifully put. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So, Jeff, if there were people who are interested in your archery program, where would they go to find out information?
Okay, so yeah, if you are interested in an archery program, learning archery, understanding what the programs we have, you can just go to our website. It is just bodoc.com. It's BOWDOC.com. If you are interested in, or have any questions for me about anything that you heard in the podcast, you can email me directly at jeff@bodoc.com.
Well, I absolutely loved today's interview, and maybe just because I'm biased, but Thank you for joining us. And thank you, all of our listeners, for joining in. Remember that you can find us at thesoulfulleaderpodcast.com. You can also find us, we've got the Soulful Leader Project. So our website for that is tslp.life. Remember, it's .life, not .com. And on our Facebook page and our LinkedIn page at The Soulful Leaders. So thank you to Jeff Sanchez for joining us today, and we will see you all next week on the Soulful Leader Podcast.
And that wraps up another episode of the Soulful Leader Podcast with your hosts, Stephanie Allen
and Maren Oslack. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to dive deeper, head over to our website at thesoulfulleaderpodcast.com.
Until next time.
All right, thank you.